Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Yet another CSGO map analysis video awaits you. This is why you clicked, presumably. Here we are. It's Assault. Who made this map? Let's find out. Let's go on a journey of education together. Should I have this up already? Yanzl, apostrophe, RZL, and Oliver. So, with those names out there, let's take a journey. Let's figure out what's going on with this map. Now, this map, I think, was probably one of the higher rated ones. Like, obviously, Swamp was pretty highly rated. I didn't really see too much about the others. Maybe Anubis had some words said about it. But Basalt has been one of those maps where I think I've seen a lot of hubbub around it. So we're going to check that out. I'm going to give you my thoughts on whether or not it's deserved. So far, a fairly simple-looking map, actually. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of all of these rock spires that are presumably related to the map's namesake. But this is, of course, T-spawn. That's where Crow's hanging. We've got this little side approach, mostly useful for nade lineups, as I'll show you in a bit. And then you get to, I guess, a mid, a sort of mid. There's not really a mid of the map. Like, if we pull all the way back, we'll notice that where my crosshairs placed is pretty close to CT spawn. And so obviously I'm like hanging over T-spawn right now. And so that's sort of like a mid. And there are connections from mid to the other sites and to the other spawns. But I think the fact that this map feels very compact, without being too overly small, contributes to the sense that there's a lot of value in every nook and cranny of this particular map. Before I continue, I should mention that you can indeed jump up around here and move around and, take angles and stuff. So you can certainly elevate your Z level. I was talking about that in Mustang's map analysis video, if you missed that. I talked about how I really appreciate when there's ways to adjust your Z so that you can take elevated peaks, especially when you're going into this middle area. You can peek from here, you can peek from here. You can really just confuse oppers, right? Really test their map knowledge and their reaction times. So there's that. I'll show you some smokes for that area, but first let's go to the B bomb site, since we're on this side of the map anyway. 01, 02, there's no 03, which makes me happy. And this sort of approach into the B bomb site has a couple of different sort of tricks up its sleeve. Now you can sneak your way up here. I'm pretty sure you can self-boost onto this crate here. Yeah, of course you can. Why wouldn't you be able to do it? And so you can do that and then take a fight at here or here from this angle, this position here, in case there are some CTs over there. The other thing you can do is, of course, if you're rotating from B site to the middle of the map, right? You can take this approach and then peek out like this. Notably, there's no step or jump needed over here. You just step down with a bit of a slope, so that helps you there, and then you can, try to wide swing or whatever. But that being said, some interesting battles already taking place in my head. I'm thinking of like different things that you can do. And yeah, here we are. We're looking at the B-bomb site pretty much. We're here. So obviously CTs will mostly be approaching from over here. CT spawn is right over there where that gentleman Iquare is. He's a cool guy. Say hi to him. So you come over here and you can pretty much very, very quickly take some fights, take some angles. Hold some angles, presumably quicker than the rest of the gentleman from the T side can actually get over here. So I think the timings definitely favor CTs in this particular bomb site. You can pretty much get set up and maybe even like lob some grenades from the comfort of a post plant or pre-plant position, and not worry too much about it. Notably, you can't plant your bomb on this little crate here. You can only plant in this white area. So none anywhere else. No other pavement is plantable, so just this marble-like substance over here. Now, that means, obviously, you have to... I think this is going to be a utility-based bomb site. Now, obviously, some bomb sites are... you're able to mess around with not necessarily having to throw utility to take it, or as much utility. Like, obviously, any utility will help, generally speaking, if used well. This bomb site, I've already found a bunch of lineups for it. For example, if you want to clear that little side room over there, which you can sort of see when I jump, this is a super safe angle to take. You just aim to a little bit to the left of the top of that trim there. You do a run throw, And it Molotovs out anybody who's like hiding over here, and even forces somebody who's in here back. Now, of course, Molotovs in CSGO have a little bit of RNG to them as far as I understand, so sometimes it will Molotov deeper. But as every single time I've thrown this, I've never failed to Molotov out that position. So that's like a super easy one if you wanted to take B site with that. I mean, honestly, you could just like, you could solo take this site by doing that Molotov, and then I'll show you a lineup for a smoke that will help you plant. You pretty much just want to aim a little bit down to this little cross section of the stone, and then you just jump throw. And that will land over here, which will allow you to more or less get a safe plant. Like you can plant in the smoke, and obviously you're going to be spammed. And I think you're a little bit visible as well if you do decide to try to plant there, but maybe not. No, I think you're pretty safe, actually. If you plant immediately upon being able to, you should be able to plant in the smoke. But obviously it's like an easy area to just spam you through anyway, even if you're not expressly visible. But the idea is that it covers you from this particular angle. And I'm sure there's some angles that you could find to smoke off, like maybe down here or something. The roof over here actually stops you from being able to smoke off this position directly without more or less already being over here. Like I think there's probably a fairly easy lineup to find if you have, you know, control, like if you have that Molotov, or you can also do, instead of doing the run throw that I mentioned earlier for the Molotov, you can actually just left click throw, and that will smoke this position off. So if you decide you want to do that rather than Molotov it, you could, you know, do an exec where you smoke that, and then the other guy can throw the other smoke that's right here, and then you're creating kind of a wall, which will still allow you to plant, and especially if you throw a flashbang or something to cover the plant sound. You know, there's plenty of different things that you could do. But assuming you do have that smoked off, I'm sure you could do some sort of jump throw that will potentially smoke that off. But I haven't been able to find it, and the roof does make it a little tricky. Like maybe, I'm not sure if nades can fall through here. It looks like they can, so you could probably get something like that done. But even then, like you'd have to find the right angle to do that, and you'd probably be doing something like this. That would allow you to do something like that's not too bad. You could probably aim a little bit to the left of that and of that particular lineup, and well, I guess not too far to the left. I like to find loosey-goosey smokes, if you know what I mean. I like to find smokes that aren't actually going to be too pixel perfect so that people can figure them out. And of course, I'm always running a 64-tick server, by the way, so don't ever think that, at least I think so. How do I check that? It's like netgraph, right? Yeah. So I'm almost always running a 64-tick, so don't ever think that this stuff is 128-tick. But yeah, I'm sure you can find some lineup that smokes this off adequately, where any CTs after the fact will have to be peeking from certain angles, but CTs still have some power here. They just need to realize that once their shit is smoked, they're kind of in a one and done position unless they pop flash themselves over, right? Something like you could actually use this to your advantage here, I think. Oh, maybe not. I guess you'd have to pop flash something like this, right? Which will still like make a noise and probably be seen. But if you're in this position, you know, you might as well throw it over here. Like in theory, you could probably find something like this. But that's going to be tricky. You're going to have to remember that like over here, you know, so that doesn't happen. You have to be crouched and aiming somewhere in that area. So you got to figure that one out in practice. It's also not very loosey-goosey just because you've got to take into account the fact that the wall blocks that. But I think that there's a lot of potential just for the fact that this is clearly a more tactical bomb site based on how you have to take it. Because CTs arrive sooner, but there is an open skybox in this area, you've got a lot of opportunity. You can actually, I found some weird-ass smoke earlier, and I don't really remember exactly what it was, but I think it was something like all the way back in T-spawn, and then aim a little bit to the left of the spire, and then you're going to be running, and when your crosshair... That's psychotic. When your crosshair... meets this part here, you'll see this. So that's obviously like a powerful smoke to like stop any CT aggression. If they're pushing you, you can throw that smoke. So that's just an example of what you can do. And let me turn off this. Actually, I don't even have the Streamlabs active. Well, I have no idea how that even made any sound. Then you're just gonna have to deal with that, I guess. Hopefully, nobody else chain subs to me while I'm sitting here trying to record this video. At least it didn't pop up on screen, as far as I understand, so that's cool. That's what that was, though. That's what that sound effect was. Imagine if that was just in the map. That could be like a secret sound effect that you hear every now and then, because you obviously hear that generator whirring to life every now and then. So that could be pretty epic. But I think beside that, you also have to consider the idea of Like the fact that it's an open skybox, the fact that you can throw smokes that can seem to have some utility, even from as far back as like the literal farthest spot from from T-spawn, means that, I mean, presumably there's going to be some lineups that CTs can use, which I'm kind of reminded of like CTs throwing deep Mirage apps smokes for B site. Something like that could be something that you could find on this particular site, which I think would be really neat. And I think that there's a lot of potential in that. And so I definitely want to see where that sort of comes from. So we'll go back to CT spawn. I showed it a little bit earlier, but we'll continue our tour and eventually link up with A. So again, the CT rotation towards B, like I said, you're probably going to have like an opper playing deep unless he wants to take like obviously like a more aggressive angle that leaves you with a little bit more to play with, but obviously a little bit more danger. Because of the placement of this B box, you're going to have to deal with the fact that you're either playing a forward angle that's more dangerous or a back angle that really only gives you a little bit of room to work with. So this is a bomb site that will definitely take like 2 people to play, I think. You could obviously have somebody that's cheating towards this connection towards mid, but the B connector by itself is actually easily flanked if you don't have mid control, right? So I guess in theory, this will probably play out a little bit like A site on cache. I drew a parallel to this on another map, I don't remember. But basically A site on cache, usually you have like one guy A anchoring, maybe the oppers at truck or something, and then there's some guy in highway. So at most you've got 2 people on the side and 1 cheating towards mid, and that way there's a quick rotator towards B with 2 people at B. But usually the opper is going to be like either at truck or at in middle itself in connector, which I think is Z there. I don't remember that side. I haven't played that map in a while. But yeah, that should give you some idea. Like generally speaking, you're probably going to have an opper at back, whatever you want to call that. Some people call it quad. I don't even know what quantifies a quad. I don't know why. Like unless it's got a picture of Semphis' arm there, I don't really see why you would call anything a quad in the game. But sure, we'll call this quad too. Bench, whatever. Why does it look like a radiator? There you go, radiator. Opper's going to be hanging radiator, and then you're probably going to have like a rifler holding around here, or maybe even over here if he wants to be super aggro. And even in some world, you could probably, like, especially if you're getting smoked off over here, like the smoke is coming over here, you could be playing this angle or this angle, trying to spot the T's, and being able to sort of play around this angle a lot would allow you to help yourself out a little bit, because you can like throw flashes around here. You can take fights from 2 different angles and also 2 slightly different Z levels as well, 2 different pieces of elevation, which is a pretty important element, I think. So you got to consider that as a T approaching. Like you need to know where the CTs probably want to be. And again, we're still trying to deconstruct this map as if it was like any other map that I've been deconstructing so far and analyzing, with the idea being that I'm trying to figure out where CTs are going to be given the most chance to properly set up their team for victory, like their CT line of scrimmage, if you will, and then where the Ts are going to poke and prod, and what the strategies that they have in their availability in general, like what strategies they have that they can use, that sort of stuff. So as far as A sites, grenades in general, I actually haven't found that many. I think I found 1 Molotov that would be useful for Ts taking, and I found a Molotov and a smoke for CTs retaking from spawn, which I'll show later on. But this is A side, and obviously the rotation to this side is also pretty quick for CTs. I think what's interesting is that normally you'll have at least 1 bomb site that takes longer for CTs to reach than the other. Not necessarily longer than for CTs to reach than Ts. Like you can have an equal arrival time for CTs and Ts reaching a bomb site, or slightly skewed in one team's favor, usually the CTs. But generally, you're going to have 1 bomb site that's longer to reach than the other by a significant margin. In this case, I guess B site is a little bit longer to reach, takes a little bit longer to reach, but I actually think it's really neat that there's so many connections between the different sites and mid is what takes the CTs the longest to reach. I think that's an interesting wrinkle, because I'm pretty sure that's the case. At least it's probably comparable to B. A is obviously quicker. We can tell that just by looking at this. So if you're just going through A and not through mid at all, the spots that you have to your advantage are kind of low. You're probably, I mean, you can also come through here, this little CT connector for A, which doesn't connect back to mid, but does give you an interesting angle, a couple of angles to play at. It's not quite as full of cover as something like Graveyard on Inferno's A site, but it's similar in theory. So you've got that, and then obviously you have this connector that goes back to mid that I'll show later on. I guess I'll just get my utility out of the way since I talked about it earlier. So The reason why I actually haven't found that much utility on T side for taking this site is something that I'll illustrate a little bit later. But I'm pretty sure the lineup was something like standing in this corner and around here you just jump throw. Okay, it looks like it's a little bit... I think it's between the leftmost bit and the middle, something like that. It's not super necessary to be like mega precise, but if you aim too low, obviously you're gonna it's gonna bounce off of this this glass, which if it's not popped, it may end up impact. It's not gonna go through that, but it will probably slow the grenade down, and I'm not sure how that works out. So this smokes this off so that if you're retaking like 1 or 2 people from here, you can cause some havoc. If you manage somehow to get yourself into a good position with that smoke thrown, I'm pretty sure the lineup was really simple, like something like aiming up from that green building to the trim of the red building and then running left click throw. Whoa, that's definitely not it. Maybe it's a jump throw. No, I don't think so. I think it's like a running throw. Well, I don't remember. Clearly I'm, maybe it's like something like this. I vaguely recall something like this being the case. Yeah, that's closer to it. It's supposed to land over here, but it's a little bit to the left of this upper left-hand yellow building. So like if you aim a little bit to the left of the trim there, that should do the trick. Well, it didn't this time, but it's something like that. I'm not going to spend too much time laboring that point, but it's basically just a Molotov this position, and in an ideal world, when you really hit it right, you actually end up Molotoving a little bit over here in case somebody's like doing some really risky position, like holding an op angle like this, which obviously is super niche, but the fact that it does that most of the time is pretty helpful. So then I'll show the Molotov from T side as well as the T side approach. So this giant barn thing is actually pretty neat. I think unlike some of the areas of Mustang that I criticized for being too empty, this map has a nice amount of variety visually, and it keeps things relatively simple. I find that generally speaking, outside of like these pillars over there, which are simple but also kind of abstract in a way. I find that generally most maps that try to do something that's not basic and kind of clean cut, not only do they confuse readability, generally speaking, which this map has pretty excellent readability, actually, so it's very functional as far as its aesthetics go, but you'll also end up having... I wanted to see if I could boost onto that tire. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's the case. But... you'll also end up finding that it's just confusing to look at and doesn't look very aesthetically pleasing. So it's not just that it's not functional from the perspective of trying to be a readable game, but generally speaking, when things get too avant-garde, if you will, or just too complicated, you'll end up having a mess visually, both in terms of aesthetics, like whether or not it's aesthetically pleasing to look at, and also whether or not you can keep track of what's happening when it comes to like what is actually happening in the game, so readability. So I like the fact that this map is fairly clean cut in that sense. The rocks are obviously a little bit weirder. The waterfall seems slightly better than the waterfall that we saw. I mean, obviously not up here, but you're very rarely going to see that in game, so whatever. But it seems slightly better than the disaster that we were seeing in Victoria, so there's points for that. At least I know it's supposed to be a waterfall. And the reason why I wasn't able to find as much utility spots, like lineups in general, for this particular site is that anytime I thought I found something that was remotely reproducible, I couldn't really get back into the same position because you kind of just slide all over the place when you're trying to stick yourself into a corner. So you would actually have to find some weird-ass lineup. And nothing in here is particularly different aesthetically, so it's really difficult to line yourself up with stuff. Like, I guess you could try to line yourself up with this, but even then, like... good luck trying to find a spot that's consistent. So if indeed there are any non-loosey-goosey smokes that you end up finding, or lineups for anything, you're probably going to have a really difficult time actually, locking yourself in place appropriately. So what I did end up finding was a Molotov that was something like a little bit to the left of the fence there. And when you throw this Molotov, it's basically the T-side equivalent of the CT thing that I was talking about earlier. So as you can see, a Molotov's out over here, and a Molotov's out down here. Again, there's a little bit of RNG, but I've never not Molotoved back there, and most of the time it seems to spread over here as well. Even on the low ground, which is pretty nice. So that's a really good way to clear out any one-and-doners that are like holding from this angle for the approach, or even somebody who's like... I guess if they're trying to like bait you out over here and to play a headshot angle or something. Obviously, if you end up throwing that Molotov and they're playing all the way back in here, a much more safe position, it will cloud their readability at least, but it's not going to completely cover you. So you may actually want to throw the same lineup after you throw that Molotov, you can throw the you can have a guy who's hanging back with utility, and he can throw a smoke. Because obviously, if you do that, you're going to end up having well, that's embarrassing. But you're gonna if you end up doing that, you're going to end up obviously lighting the smoke on fire, or lighting the fire on smoke. Jesus Christ, extinguishing the fire. There you go. And oh, that's pretty epic. That's just CSGO being CSGO, but you're going to end up creating a smoke wall for this area. I haven't found a smoke lineup for this area. I found a smoke that like does something like this from that exact same spot that I was throwing it somewhere else. I think it like bounced off of this wall and landed over here, which is useful for blocking off visibility of this player. In fact, I guess I can just go and see if I can find that again, because that might actually be useful. But other than that, I don't think I was able to figure anything out in particular. So it's something like that. Obviously, that one was not exactly it, but you don't really want this because it creates sort of a, not really a one-way, but it is confusing for players, Ts that are coming in, so you don't really want that smoke anyway. But it would be something like that. Maybe you could like do a quick run throw, like you step back by one unit or something from over here, and then you could do that, and that might do it. Bounce all the way back. So that's really only going to smoke them off if they're like playing back. Obviously, if they just stand up here, they're going to try to op you or something. So there's probably one that you can get that will just smoke off that door, or maybe like over here or something, so that it's more effective. But CTs, generally speaking, have more ways and more angles and more ways just in terms of positioning, not even purely angles, but like utility of their position. They can't boost up there, unfortunately. But there's a bunch of different ways that the CTs can hold the site that nullifies utility a little bit. Not completely, but there's ways where even though there is an open skybox, the map is actually constructed in such a way, the bomb site in this area is constructed in such a way where a lot of the angles are not real easily nullified. I'm sure there's some smokes that will help you, but it's probably going to be like a 3 or 4 smoke bomb site if you really want to take it, which obviously leaves you open in the like once it becomes a broken round or at least like a post plan or something. You want to keep some utility for the post plan itself, and in case you need to go back and go towards B, which as we already discussed is pretty important to have some utility if you're going to be taking that. So generally speaking, especially for mid rounds, you want to have like 1 or 2 smokes at least. So if you can do that, especially if you end up killing a guy who drops a smoke or something, it can fall in your favor. But I have a feeling that considering how many smokes and how much utility in general you're going to need to take this bomb site with utility, as opposed to just trying to be like out aim them, you're probably best served by throwing a bunch of flashes or something over there. And obviously you have this thing that you can pop that window and then throw a flashbang or whatever. But I'm not sure what lineups you can find from inside this building. I didn't even bother trying that. It seems like it would probably end up being really asinine to figure that out anyway, but that's like a lineup where you're throwing that to that angle, and even then it's not really that useful. So like I said, I'm sure there's ways that you can do that, but maybe you could get yourself stuck in over here and then somehow find a way to line that up, and that might help you. Yeah, I guess that's useful. That smokes off the CT take in that sense. But anyway, it's a little bit tougher for me to find those, and obviously I'm not going to be spending 8 years on each map to try to figure that out. So let's go to mid, where I actually do know some utility from the T side. I don't have, I didn't bother looking for any for the CTs, but I'm sure there's some that exist. So you're going to come over here. Remember, in case you got lost because I was no clipping, CTs or T-spawn into the area where you're, I guess like the B approach or whatever. Before you get to B, or before you even look at that, you're going to come in here and stick yourself into this corner. And I believe it's something to the effect of, yeah, right here on the bottom of this windowsill, bottom right. You're going to jump throw, left click, jump throw. This is going to smoke off the barn entrance. Everything looks like a barn. It's not a barn, but whatever. That house entrance is going to get smoked off. Then if you want to smoke off the sniper's perch that you can see over here, I guess I should actually show you what this area of the map looks like. But it's basically like this is the approach to B that I was talking about somebody's cheating towards, similar to Cache Highway, A site. That's towards B. And this room over here is where you can go to as Ts. This is actually more easily accessible from the T's point of view. So you might not ever even want to smoke this, but if you actually need to smoke this from the T side, or you happen to be a CT and you're in this area, you can stick yourself into this little nook over here, and you can aim. There's like it's probably not very visible in this YouTube video, but there's a small divider. I'll zoom in real quick so you can see. There's like a dividing line of dots here, above the more obvious divider, and you're going to aim around the middle of that and just jump throw. It's kind of a difficult lineup to articulate, but this I did find another smoke that works for this. But if you have the door open on the if you open it from the other angle, not this one, but the other one, it will actually go through and it won't bloom properly. So that's the one that's super safe. It doesn't matter what angle the door is at; it will always go that way. So there you go. There's 2 smokes for you. But I should actually talk about this door. I actually feel like this room in general is one of the most impactful rooms in any mid I've ever seen. Like, considering how many different angles and different approach points, there's actually 4 ways to get to mid, right? So there's the B site connector, the CT connector, the T connector, and the A site connector. But A site favors T's. The A site connector favors T's because of the fact that you're going to get here sooner. So even though this seems like it would be a CT position, just instinctively, you would expect somebody who's overlooking this, especially when they're going into mid. This is actually not neutral territory, and it's not CT territory. It's definitively easier for T's to get down here and then take angles over here. So the B site and CT connectors are CT, and the T side and A site connectors are T. And just that angle alone, that's going to morph some seriously crazy engagements. People who don't know anything about this map are going to be assuming that that's like allied territory that they just don't know about, and they're going to get absolutely annihilated, to say nothing of the fact that you can boost yourself over here. So in theory, I guess, if you end up finding some smoke for CT side to wall that off so that you can't get destroyed, an opper or somebody else could, especially if they have better movement than I do, they can jump up on this, and then they can make their way up here. Because I just did it the first time without trying, without even knowing if it was possible, and now I can't replicate it because that's just how things are. But there you go. And they could, in theory, obviously this starts closed, and they could, in theory, open this and then hold this, or just like expect you to be coming over here and then hold that, and that's CSGO for you. Holy shit! But yeah, so I'm sure there's going to be some highlight plays where that happens, and good to see that you can actually do that by yourself if you have half decent movement. So that's pretty neat. Obviously, this toolbox is going to be a position that I'm sure people are going to find Molotovs for without even having to contest with that particular... Well, that wasn't it. But without even having to contest that angle. But I'm not sure exactly where it is. Maybe it'll just end up being a smoke because I guess fuck trying to find a Molotov for that. Or not, maybe not. It's pretty much just this, right? You would throw that and then... Yeah, that's perfect. So you just come up on these little stairs. This is actually a great op angle if you want to take a fight into here. But more specifically, you are going to expose yourself to that toolbox angle. So I would say toolbox is probably going to be like one of those commonly held angles, even though it's kind of a one-and-done position. If you get a kill or there's a smoke that blooms, obviously it's super easy for you to jump up over here into B. So I can see the B site anchor if there's an engagement to be made in... Well, not really the anchor, but like the B-side reinforcement, right? The B-side reinforcer will probably cheat towards middle most rounds to hold something like this. And then if there's some contact or some flashes or something, they can easily, drop down over here, take a fight over here, and then, try to get themselves out of that position. But it is going to be a risky firefight to take for sure if they do jump down over here. Whereas over here, they can take a shot or a couple shots or something and then pull back. Notably, there's no way to throw nades out of this building without just throwing them directly out there, which is interesting. I'm not really sure exactly how that plays out, but otherwise they will have to come out all the way over here and call for somebody to flash them out there, right? And that will bloom, and that's probably going to hit most people, I would imagine, right? Let's try that again. Okay, I guess not. So yeah, they have to be pretty far out and like looking over here. I'm not even sure if this works. If you're like just looking down here. Okay, it does. So notably, obviously, it's not something that they can hear. It's similar to a flash from like Mirage connector, A-site connector into mid, something like that. I guess a more reasonable flash would probably be something like that, where you throw it over there. But maybe not. Like I don't really know. I think it gets blocked by the building most of the time. Yeah, so generally speaking, you're not going to find too much of a reason to... You might actually have to be like all the way back here in order to throw a supporting flash. At least that seems like... Wow, I was through the building. At least that seems like something where you could probably find some utility lineup or something on CT side. If you stuck yourself into this corner and did some psychotic jump throw, you could probably get a smoke over here. that actually assists your team, unlike that one. One thing that I am happy about this map in general is that it doesn't seem like it actually takes that much time to learn smokes, so... Like, obviously that one's not great either. I overcorrected a bit too much. So something like this, maybe? I accidentally hit my rethrow grenade, but... rethrow grenade button. But yeah, there you go. So like that's the middle smoke that I was talking about that will allow you to reposition and take an early engagement. But again, notably, like if you stand up here, you will be able to see them make the jump. And maybe even if you're like back a little bit, like maybe on top of this, you can definitely see up that, even that if that is smoked. So that's important. Like you're going to have to, you know, combo that with a flash or something if you really want to make it up there. So lots of interesting angles already to take. You know, if CTs or Ts rather are pushing through mid and going towards A, they obviously have the advantage of coming over to here, with the same area that I was Molotoving the shit out of earlier, trying to find some good mollies. This room, I'm not sure what the best approach to this room would be as Ts or CTs, really. Like, CTs obviously want to have mid control, but unless there's like two guys here, one of them holding an angle over here, and then the other one like in a one and done position up here, they're probably not going to be able to defend this very well. If there's more than one T coming here, that they can pretty easily trade this out, I feel like, especially if they're also pressuring at the barn door entrance over there. I'm going to call them every red building a barn, by the way. So obviously you can elevate your Z over here, which is a nice touch. Allows you to do something like this or something like this. If you're peeking out and expecting somebody to be holding like a crossfire, which I guess they would never be doing it over there, but you know, they might be, well, they might be over here, actually. They might be in that Molotov spot that I was showing off earlier, holding something like this. Right, so they would be expecting you maybe to be over here, and then they would have to correct, which is not that much time, but silvers are silver, so who knows. And then obviously, actually I would have likened this sort of like Tetris, but obviously providing less cover, and actually providing it with more options as a T, I think. Maybe not more. Maybe that's fake news. But certainly you can like jump over here if you need to. Just making sure you can't plant on the truck, which I should have tested earlier. Yeah, you can only plant on the ground. And that is sort of what you would expect in general. Takes 2 jumps to... Oh, no, never mind. I was just bad. But it can take 2 jumps to jump over there onto that. What are we missing? I feel like I missed a room or something. I guess I missed the approach to the window room that I was showing the smoke for from the T-spawn, I guess. So if you really want to get here as soon as possible, you'd have to like do some parkour up here and then just, I mean, you'd be here. The timings definitely favor you getting here, but obviously CTs can come from this angle or from this angle and already be holding this. If you can smoke that off from T-spawn or near T-spawn, surely there's some smoke that you can find for smoking it off. Not quite, but that wouldn't have hit it anyway. Actually, because this wall is here, you may not be able to smoke this off from CT spawn. But at that point, maybe you could find a smoke lineup for like from B side or something. I'm not sure. There's got to be some way for you to smoke that off, I feel like. Well, that didn't quite work out, but I'm sure there's some way that you can land a smoke over here. I'm not sure exactly where you'd have to be. You definitely have to be on B site though. Like you can't throw that from CT spawn just because of this door here. So, and I don't think even if you manage to land it somehow, like right here, it's not going to bleed through the floor, so it's not going to impact readability. That's interesting. Well, I guess we didn't actually miss a room. I was thinking that we missed some approach somewhere, but not really. Obviously, if you're trying to rotate to mid through B, that's the thing is like, again, B is like the centerpiece of the map, obviously, or mid rather is the centerpiece of the map. You want to get control of mid almost more than you want control of the bomb sites, just because if you have mid control, you can go either way. And you force the other team, more importantly, to take the longer rotation to either site. But this also, like broken rounds, which is when like there's like a 3v3 or some other like man disadvantage maybe or something like that for one team. Anytime you're in a broken round situation, I feel like this map will be super interesting to see like there's a lot of decision making, right? But you have to make the right decisions, obviously. So I like when you have maps that are like that. I can see why this map in particular may have ended up garnering as much praise as it did. It's a very simple, clean cut map most of the time when it comes to its visuals. really easy to find lineups, open skybox, bomb sites that favor tactical play, and a lot of angles that make it so that even if a team is really well versed on tactics, they can't necessarily completely shut out the defending team from the round. And there's also enough give and take where CTs and CT favored spots on the map, like CT spawn, for example, CT rotation spots can still provide you with enough utility to retake sites, right? So like that's, I think, really, really neat, and something that we don't really see that much of when it comes to working with all these custom maps. So this is definitely one of the more impressive maps from a gameplay perspective. I would say out of the maps that I've reviewed so far and analyzed, probably the strongest one gameplay wise. Certainly there's a lot. I think like in the running right now, I'm probably expecting the top 5, like if they were all judged on gameplay, which I read through some of the threads on the MapCore site, and I got to say the judging seems much more concerned with like thematics and visuals than it actually does gameplay. Whereas I only really give a shit about the gameplay. As long as I can read and understand what's happening on the map, the visuals are gravy. Certainly I expect good looking maps. Or I should say I expect good-looking maps. In an ideal world, we would expect that, but I'd never expect good-looking anything from anybody. So, like, this isn't even a slight against custom content developers. I don't think Valve's maps look that great either. So there's definitely, like, for me, that's not at all what I'm concerned about, even if you disagree with my personal take on maps or what maps look good or whatever. I think this is one of the better-looking maps just because of how simplistic it is and how just, like, it's very, like, you know where you are on the map. Like, remember when I was reviewing Anubis and I was talking about how the map felt like there was too many similarities across the entire map in general. You always know where you are in this map, like instinctively. This wooden trim doesn't really appear that many other places, especially not in that many other shapes. Like it's pretty much situated around B-side. B-site. I keep saying B-side. So then you've got like this green building, which is pretty much only in the A site or only towards the A site. And then, obviously the other colors kind of range around, but even still, like the style of construction and architecture and the layout of the maps, like it's very, very clear where you are at any given time. Obviously, the whole salt area over here, whatever the fuck those pillars are, is pretty clear, like where you are. And they don't, there's not a reusage of the same kind of prop either. Like obviously the crates are kind of everywhere, but there's enough of like an obvious, like this is what this map or this area is. Like this truck over here, the van over here looks different enough, or I guess it's another truck, but whatever. And then of course there's no vehicle over on the B side. So like the two vehicles that are here are distinct enough, even though they're the same color scheme. I guess I would love you some criticism of the fact that they're the same exact color scheme, but whatever. It's easy enough to read everything, every kind of skin against these. So that's fine. Still an improvement. It's still hilarious how the cube maps look like, but whatever. Just in general, like it's really, really straight and to the point. It doesn't play around, and you know exactly where you are in the map based on where you are, what you're looking at. And it's super easy to find lineups, super easy to, like it's one of those maps that I genuinely believe would be easy to learn and hard to master. So I think right now my tier list is probably this at the top of the maps that I've reviewed. Swamp is probably in the top 2 or 3, I would say so far. I'm expecting, I think Feast is another map that's like this, but obviously I haven't gone there. I'm expecting this to be in the top 3 for me, like my ranking. I will rank these at some point. I don't know exactly what format that will be, but it'll probably be some sort of quickly edited video that I put together at some point. But that'll be after I review all of the honorable mentions and the finalists. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, really, really nice map. I really like this. I think this could easily be in the matchmaking. And it wouldn't even really need visual updates, I don't think. Like, okay, maybe fix the fucking waterfall, but it's not even that important because you're not looking at it. Maybe find a way to make this a little bit more reasonable, clipping-wise, so that we can find more lineups. But in general, I think that this map, like, it's a super strong foundation. And if this were added to the map pool right now, I would view it as an improvement over at least a few different maps. I'll go right out and say it. I think Dust 2 and Mirage, as consistent as they are, we need a shakeup. And so that would be something that I would do, is like I would just slot this in place of Mirage or Dust 2 or something. Like it's a simple map despite the fact that it's not a 3-lane map, because obviously there's a lot of connections. It's kind of a 3-lane map with a lot of connections, I guess. So I guess you could replace Mirage with that, since Dust 2 has less connections. If you wanted to keep Dust 2 or something, I guess Dust 2 did pretty recently get added in. So Mirage is probably the next one to get removed. I would actually rather see this than Cache. And I know like Cache is obviously like a mainstay. So it probably will get, replace Mirage or whatever, but this map could easily fit in, is what I'm saying. Like that's my argument anyway. And I think it's super interesting. There's a lot of opportunities for both teams. And I don't even know that it would necessarily be CT or T-sided. I think it would be a really well-balanced map, especially once people take the time to learn lineups and learn strategies and rotations and timings and all that other junk that we take for granted when we watch the professionals play. So yeah, hats off to those guys, and I hope that they get the recognition that they deserve from people who are actually in the scene, and unlike people who like me who make videos for like 2 guys. So there you go. That's my review. Mwah.